Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And we have a pretty big one coming up today. I'm finally getting around to launching that fix mission to land on Venus. We are progressing with our manned spaceflight program, and we have another new satellite that we're going to be launching. So we've got all sorts of new science experiments that we want to get rolling, so let's get right to it, shall we? All right, here on the pad, we have a brand new science satellite that is also going to be doing scanning work around Earth. It's always nice when you can get people to pay for your science contract, so 3, 2, 1, ignition. And we have liftoff of the Biome Scan Earth, good lord. Yeah, so this is, like I said, we are just getting a contract to pay for our science work around Earth, and we're testing out a lot of new stuff. Maybe not a lot of new stuff, but a couple new things anyways. We have a whole bunch of new science experiments from the new batch that we got in interplanetary science, and we have, you know, the biome scan, so we are going to be testing that out. So yeah, otherwise this is our Cecil-1, the Black Knight rocket that we are sending up. It's got the H-1 engine on the bottom here, and a single RL-10 Centaur stage. And so yeah, otherwise this should be a fairly normal launch, one would hope. Lovely scenery, lovely terrain shaders and everything else as we are coming up with our brand new science satellite, the first of a new generation of science satellites that I will be doing all over the place. I have another version of this that is a vastly more capable probe that is going to be heading up to the moon shortly, but yeah, we will see how that goes. I'm also testing out a little bit of what do you call it? I'm testing out new trajectories on MacLeod PVG. I am attempting now to have just a low perigee, but my absolute total target apogee, because I believe this is what we need for the biome scan. So that I'm just targeting that straight up because I've heard that I had completely wrong information that I've given you guys in a previous episode with regards to when it is most advantageous to change your inclination. So I had said something like, oh, it is actually better to change your inclination at a high altitude rather than doing it during ascent, and that is wrong. That is absolutely incorrect. It is most advantageous to change your inclination during your ascent, and unless you are changing your inclination somewhere like above the orbit of the moon, like 400 million meters, something like that. That's just how much better it is to do it during ascent than it is to do it at orbital altitudes. So, correction for the record there. So what we're doing here is, and it's actually also better to have a longer burn during which you are changing your inclination. So what we're doing here is we have a target of 2,500 kilometers, and that is actually a lot easier to change my inclination to 85 degrees. So we're changing our inclination to 85 degrees over the course of the burn to 2,500 kilometers. Do you see what that means there? That means that over that entire burn of all the way up to 2,500 kilometers, instead of just to 150, we are slowly changing our inclination, which is going to reduce the amount that we are off of our prograde vector, that is going to make it more efficient and cheaper to change our inclination. So just wanted to make sure that that was correct out there. I do try my best not to give out incorrect information, although I am not always correct about a lot of things. So whenever you guys give me corrections in the comments or on the Discord, I always do try to take that into account and make sure that I have corrected myself. So there we go. We have fairing separation, and we are continuing our burn. You see that we now have a nice gentle trajectory pointing upwards and away. We are heading almost due north right now, and yeah, everything is going fairly well so far. We had a good ignition on our H1, good ignition on our RL-10. We are burning on our way towards a good orbital altitude. We are going to be getting mostly circular. because I think at least one of my science experiments wants me to be slightly eccentric. But yeah, we are using all sorts of new technology on here, and I'll get to that as we get a little bit closer. But let's just kind of go through these science experiments really quick to make sure that I understand what the heck I'm doing. So visible imaging 2, this is the more advanced camera we have going on there, so that's pretty good. Has no special requirements, but space low, space high, it has... hopefully everything's activated now that I think about it. Nope, it's all turned off. Okay. Well, let's turn everything on as best we can. Some things we can't do... There we go. Okay. Yeah, so we actually missed out on some space, or some flying low, flying high biome data, but I'm really not that stressed about that. Even here in low orbit, it was only going to be worth 2 science for this one biome, so flying low above Earth is worth practically nothing. So that's that. Orbital perturbation, we know about that one. Mass spectrometry 2, that's one of my new ones. That requires a tiny bit of eccentricity, like just a little bit. So we're not going to have to worry too much about that. But we do need to make sure that we don't like achieve a nice, perfectly circular orbit and then leave it there. That would not be handy, because then we could not get the data from that experiment. Infrared radiometry, which is a new version of our radiometry experiment. No special needs. Cool. Imaging spectrometry has a max altitude of 4 million meters, so that should be fine. We're only going to 2.5, but we're going to be circular at about 2.5, so that should be just fine. Space. I'm a little confused now, because I thought that max altitude over Earth was, or I thought space high over Earth was like 35 million meters. So this does have a space high, value for science, but it can't get it over Earth because that's higher than 4 million meters. It's very possible that I can't do math, so we'll see what this actually shakes out to be. But that may be something that like it can only do do that over certain bodies like moons and so forth. So I guess we'll see. And no special requirements on cosmic ray science 2. Okay, yeah, so I have no idea what that's about, but I'm not that worried about it. I think that's just something that is a prerequisite for other bodies. So yeah, it's just something that we can only do around moons and so forth. Yeah, that's very strange, though. I feel like my math must be wrong, but I guess we'll see. So anyways, those are the science experiments that we are tackling. We also have our scan multispectral sensor, which... Oh, look at that. It actually has this information here. But yeah, 2,500 kilometers for this is ideal. So that is what we're going to be doing, and we should be getting good scan data from that, and that will begin to show us our biomes, which is fantastic. I think I can't actually. Let's see. I wonder if I can get like a. Yeah, it's not in here. I thought I saw that this thing can only run when there's surface and daylight. Here we go. So that requires surface and daylight, which is going to be really interesting around things like the moon. So we're not going to be able to scan if it can't see, which makes perfect sense. But that's going to make it a little bit. We're going to have to plan for a very long mission if we want to scan things around the moon, for example, because that is something that takes more like 30 days rather than 1. All right, so we are shooting past our, we are in orbit, mostly-ish, getting pretty darn close, and we are still burning nicely. Lost my ascent guidance window. Here we go. We should be done in just 2 more seconds, and main stage cut off. Fantastic. There we go. So we have a nice eccentric orbit. Disengage that. I'm not that worried about it. So now we are going to have a coast phase as we get around to our apogee in about an hour. So how are we doing as far as power is concerned? We have 1 day worth of power even without moving that around. So we can just go ahead and plan our burn. All right, but I do think I'm going to point us at the sun because I want to see. We do have some MLI layers on this upper stage here. Yeah, at least some amount of that. And our boil-off loss is 0.01. But I just want to see if it gets any better by pointing us so that there's less of it at pointing at the sun, right? If we point it this way, then there's less surface area that is being directly warmed. Yeah, so that number seems to be going down, which looks pretty nice. Yeah, look at that. So that's actually pretty dramatically reducing the amount of heat that we are going to experience over time, I hope. Maybe? Question mark? That would be very nice. But yeah, I've heard this is a thing where you try to expose the least amount of your cryogenic fuel tank to the sun as possible, and that, you know, very obviously is going to reduce the amount of heating that it experiences. And as a side effect, we're also pointing these solar panels into the sun, which means we have a nice amount of extra power generation that we are getting. All right, so let's go ahead and make our burn at apogee. All right, so that is close enough, and I'm not actually planning on stressing about this particular burn that I had planned there. What I'm just going to do is I'm going to burn until we have an eccentricity that is what we want, and also has a raises our apogee up probably to like 3 million meters, something like that, because I'd like the eccentricity to be going in the other direction. I'd rather be relatively higher rather than relatively lower. So just to remind myself, yep, so we are looking for a minimum eccentricity of 0.1, which is actually not far from where we are now. So we're going to have to flip around in the other direction, basically. So let's go ahead and fire up our engine. And we have a good ignition, and we are getting a lot of raising our altitude very, very quickly, which is good. So we're going to just flip that around, and then we are going to be burning until this says 0.1 once again. All right, eccentricity is coming up. Oh no, so it's actually going to be a little bit too high for that that other experiment. So it's going to be above the altitude that it can run one of these. Yep, the imaging spectrometry experiment. So we're not going to be running that 100% of the time, but that's fine. Like, we have a whole bunch of experiments on here, and we'll be running them sometimes, and we won't be running them other times, and that's just totally fine. Yeah, so my math is correct. So we are at 2.5 million meters. Maximum altitude is 4. So, and that's biome related, isn't it? I think it is. Imaging spectrometry. No, it's single biome or single whatever around Earth. So anyways, it's going to be, looks like 90 days to get a whole 3 science. Whoop-de-doo. Hopefully that's going to be more science elsewhere, but it's nice to have new experiments one way or the other. So anyways, we can now decouple this spacecraft. Burn that off a little bit with the shiny new... I've upgraded to Restock... Plus, restocked or whatever, and it has very little extra, but it does have a whole bunch of new nice looking RCS nodes that have really nice little burns that are understated and small and make me very happy. So I like that quite a bit. Okay, don't actually crash into the upper stage, please and thank you. So I'm going to make a grand attempt to deorbit this spacecraft. So let's point this retrograde. Off, kill rotation, just to get it out of the way a little bit. Okay, we are pointing down and away from our spacecraft is the important part, so I'm going to ignite the engine, retrograde, and we're out of here. And whatever happens to that is probably fine. That should theoretically point itself retrograde and deorbit, but if not, then I'm super not concerned. All right, so let's warp around until we get into the sun. Beautiful. Now we can take a look at our spacecraft, which is, there's not a whole lot Not a whole lot about this one. It's not too fancy. It's got a nice Aerozine engine and an RCS and just 4 RCS quads on the bottom, which gives it nice maneuverability and control. We are using one of those procedural probe cores, which is very, very nice. But yeah, it's nimble, it's small, it has a good amount of Delta V. I have a version of this that we are going to be sending to the moon that is like much more, much beefier and has like every science experiment known to man. We'll be doing that a little bit later on. But this has all the new science experiments that we could possibly want around Earth. And yeah, it's very nice, very nimble, very small, whips around. Using a... unfortunately undertuned, I think I misunderstood a little something about this antenna here. So I tuned it down to 5 dBm because when you have the antenna planning GUI pointing at Earth, like just say you say Earth, it goes, oh yeah, you're going to get 15.8 kilobits per second. That's very nice. But even at, you know, 2 megameters or whatever, like, yeah, look at that, 3 megameters, 4 megameters, yeah, you're totally fine. That assumes you're talking to the Deep Space Network, you goofus, which we will not be for the vast majority of the time. Like right now you see our signal is almost no bars because we are talking to a tiny little wimpy ground station at 3 dBi, not one of these monsters at 34 dBi. So that's my bad on thinking about that. So I will not be making that same mistake with future things, but we still get communications. It's just very weak and slow. So it's basically going to be the kind of thing where we will get big bursts of communications when it happens to be over a Deep Space Network node. And then until then, it will be very, very slowly acquiring extra data. So yeah, that's my bad, but it's also not that big of a deal. This is something that I'm planning on leaving up here for a very long time. And the power should last for a very long time. So let's go ahead and get ourselves pointed up towards the sun because we are using our brand new folding solar panels. We're not using the hinged ones any longer, which allows you to basically have a lot more solar panel in a lot smaller space, which is pretty darn cool. These are still tech level 1, which, you know, is not great. We are looking forward to our next big upgrade, which is going to change things, but they have a lot of power that we have on here. So we can turn off our avionics and we can see that we are going to run out of power in just 8 days. I'm hoping that we will finish our I think I'm gambling that we're going to finish our scan set within a couple of days and all the orbits that's going to be, because one orbit for us is 2.5 hours. So I'm hoping that's like 75 orbits before we run out of power. So I'm sincerely hopeful that that's actually going to be enough, and it might not be, but we're going to turn on the automation that will make it so that is not that big of a deal. And if it doesn't work out in 74 orbits, then we will just have to, you know, have it take a lot longer, but it should last a while, because without the massively power hungry scan set, we have tons of power. We are at a net of like the vast majority of our power draw comes from the ScanSat. So hopefully that once that's finished, then this will last forever and be able to do all these science experiments. And even if not, like I said, it'll just take a while to get it done, and then it'll be, you know, all set. And then we'll have a really nice science satellite in orbit of Earth, which I'm looking forward to. So there we go. We have that. That is our biome scanner Earth all completed. And yeah, we will be getting a lot of good data on the biomes. We are just beginning our mapping passes of Earth, and hopefully we'll be able to get a good amount of data on that. I'm not seeing that I'm getting any at the moment, but okay, we got 1% biome scanned. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we got this going on. So yeah, there we go. And hopefully in you know, not too long of a time, we will get all of the biomes of Earth scanned and understood, so that we can get more data and get more understanding of the topography and topology of Earth from space. All right, so we got a new science node unlocked, early life support and ISRU, which has some fantastic things, the most important of which is the LOX to GOX converter, which is liquid oxygen to gaseous oxygen, and that is kind of the last piece in the life support model of the Gemini spacecraft that we needed. So that should, in theory, add that to the capabilities of the Gemini automatically, so that is what we will be using for that. And it also allows us to have a chemical plant and an external ECLSS module to do all these things if we want to roll our own service module, which I'll probably do at some point, but for now I think the standard Gemini is just fine for what we're doing. So we're going to unlock those, and there we go. We have really good life support now that is going to be able to get our people, hopefully, to the moon and back. And there we go. It took a couple months, but we got 80% of the biome scan of Earth completed, which gets us 50,000 funds, which, you know, is not great, but, you know, it is an Earth observation contract. So not that big, not that, it was never going to be that much of a, that rewarding. So we have 85.8% of our biome scan done. It doesn't look like it's actually scanned the biomes at all, but, or at least I can't look at it in the map for some reason, but you know, is what it is on that. I may be using the wrong part. I had to go into a different part of the filters to find this part. It doesn't have a new model or anything, so I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about which one I grabbed, but you know, we got the contract finished anyways, so that is just fine. Okay, so that's finished, and we have one more really cool thing to watch. Finally, after a long time of work and planning and talking about it, we are finally coming around to the upgrade of our vehicle assembly building. And there we go. We now have the large size level 2 vehicle assembly building, which gives us 2 production lines to play with, which I am just absolutely stoked about. So let's see, how does that even work? We have a couple free points, but not very many. I'm hoping that all of this new science is going to give us a lot of ability to upgrade this stuff for free without spending a ton of funds doing it. So we can just go boop, boop, boop. Yeah, so I get 0.138. Yeah, I get double the bonus per point spent, and I think that's the case even if I get more lines. Like, it gives me more and more down the line. So we're starting very, very low, which, you know, is to be expected. But we will be building this up over time to the point where we can rely on this and have a good. Eventually, I want it to be matched up with our rate 1, but that does mean we're going to have to spend half of this number, so almost 100 points we're going to need to put in before it's actually, you know, equivalent. So it's going to be a long time for that, but that is what we will be working towards so that we can get 2 things built at the same time, which is just super exciting. Right now, let's kind of adjudicate our build times here. I don't want to spend many funds on upgrading this yet because we really need to get our research and development upgraded, and that's going to cost us 2 million, so we're saving up a little bit for that. Hopefully we'll have missions that can get us that amount of money soon. So yeah, we do have a Venus transfer window coming up in about 133 days. So I really need to get this Pioneer Venus finished in time. So 80 days to get that done. So yeah, we'll do that, and then we can leave it sitting as we start working on our Gemini. And our second line is not being wasted, at least, so we're putting some points in, even though it's not actually really worth much at this time. So no big deal with that, but we are moving right along. The Gemini is about halfway built, so we can expect to have this done in 40 days plus 80 days, 120 days. So that's soon enough, I think, to start doing our training for our astronauts. So we want to do Gemini mission training for Johnny Flores and Lisa Kim. They are going to be our first astronauts, and that's perfect. That's going to take them 100 days to get trained up and ready for the very first manned Gemini mission, which I am beyond excited about. So yeah, we are moving on forward. So I had a node for my Mercury spacecraft to let me know when it was here, because I thought that's when the Earth was going to be around there-ish, and I was completely incorrect. The Earth is way over there. So our closest approach, it looks like, is going to be Not enough. Look at that. Our closest approach is not going to be enough, and it's going to be in 75 days. We need to be inside of 140 megameters. It looks, or yeah. No, 100. We need to be within 140 gigameters. And it looks like we are not going to do that unless I do something with my... with what delta V I have. All right, so it looks like if I spend all of my delta V retrograde like now-ish, I should be able to get a nice closer approach, which is going to hopefully allow us to do our communications. Because otherwise, we are just not going to make it at all. We are just not going to get there, or at least on our current orbit. So, or at least not on our current pass, and we really need to make sure we do that soon before our solar panels die entirely. There's not a whole lot of science experiments draining the batteries right now, but we still need to be very careful about that. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to point retrograde, and I'm just going to burn almost all of the hydrazine I have on this thing. Yep, so we are just going to burn off a whole bunch of this fuel. We have about 300 and some seconds of burn time that we have on our generic thruster burning hydrazine, and that is, as you can see, bringing down our closest approach separation. And so I see no reason not to just believe those numbers. So we are bringing ourselves down, and that is bringing us in a little bit tighter. It's reducing our heliocentric periapsis and our apoapsis as well, because we are burning kind of in the middle of this orbit. And that is going to mean that we are going to be closer to the sun a little bit, so that's a little bit better as well. So hopefully when we get to this point, we will still have good solar power that we can use to transmit all of this beautiful data that we have built up inside this craft, which we can't see obviously because I don't have connection. So just another minute left of this burn. I'm going to leave myself like, I don't know, 50 meters per second of delta V just so that I have translation and roll control. Or yeah, all of my different translation directions. I want to make sure that I can still move around with RCS. So we are finishing up. Our closest separation is going to be a little bit more, or a little bit around 128 gigameters, I think. So there we go. We have 50 meters per second left that we can use to point ourselves at the sun and keep that orientation steady. And there we go. All right, so what we can do now is I can put a node, like, I don't know, it's here. It's 82 days. Whoa, 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 stop, stop, stop. Holy crap. I did not actually mean to time warp. Stop time warping, for goodness sake. Good lord. I ruined. Probably all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so anyways, that's... Hopefully I didn't break my space program doing that. Good lord, what did I... Onyx is coming. Okay. Alright, that's fine. Everything's fine. Good lord. But yeah, I would like to get around, let's see, that's 47 days, that's 60 days, so there's about a week or so in between when we're probably going to be entering into that area. So I'm going to put a node, we'll say there, and then hopefully we'll be able to figure out what our altitude is going to be, or our closest approach is probably going to be here-ish, is when that gets into range, because I just like to be there. I'd like to be there for that. So let's just put it right there, and then I'm going to put a alarm clock entry for that, and there we go. So yeah, we will see about that in the future. All right, so we were thankfully stopped by improved avionics, which is a really good but incremental improvement to our avionics capability that we'll be able to upgrade to when we're building our next set of spacecraft. All right, so the Mercury probe is giving me very different data through MacLeod than it is through the actual orbit window. So the orbit says that I should have a close approach in about 60 days where I am 128 gigameters away. But the rendezvous planner from MacLeod tells me that I will be 84 gigameters away in 192 days, which is back around here, I guess, which is interesting. And kind of makes sense, I guess. As we are waiting for our next launch, which is going to be, or next thing to be completed, which is going to be the Pioneer Venus 2, which we are building and getting ready for the next Venus launch window. Let's just camp out inside this this probe and wait around and see if we get a little bit closer. So we're warping around at 100x time warp here. And you can see that because we're in a much lower orbit than Earth, we are catching up a little bit on its orbit. So just kind of, whoa, did you see that? I had a signal for like a second there, just for like 1 second. And then it instantly gave me 4 KCT upgrade points. And contract complete. Yes, congratulations on the flyby. The data is coming in now, but we've lost signal again. What happened? What's going on? Are we just too far now? I'm not sure what happened there. How do I tell exactly how far away it is? Like, that's all I want to know right now. Okay, so I just put together a custom MechJeb window with distance to target, and that's giving me information that looks a little bit more correct. So we are 149 gigameters away right now. Signal is going to be around 100 and... Yeah, so it's going to be like around this point. We should be getting signal really any time now. As we are coming in and we have signal. We have a direct link back to the Deep Space Network after 346 days, the early part of which was the flyby of Mercury. Our vessel is back in contact and is out once again. All right, we lost contact and now we have contact. All right, are you going to stay put? Going to stay this time? Okay. Yeah, so I think that was actually it. Like in just like a half a second of, well, in a second of 100,000 times warp, it was able to transmit all of the data, even at the low rate that it had out here. But that's all it needed because, you know, the data of these early science experiments is fairly low in size. And it sent back 70 credits worth of science, but more importantly, it got us the 1 million fund contract for having flown by Mercury. So we got credit for all of our hard work. So that's fantastic. We have in fact succeeded where I thought we failed. But let's really be careful about how you tune your antenna from here on out. Like, I keep getting burned by this because it's so easy to mess up. But yeah, so that was a fantastic, successful mission. I am super happy about it. This probe is now, it's pretty much done. I'm going to be kind of flying around in a heliocentric orbit forever and ever. I don't think there's any... I'm just turning on the automation for everything, and we are going to be pointing down towards the sun. We have 100% sun exposure. So this is, and I've turned like I said, I turned the automation on. We're pointing at the sun. Data transmission is on. There's no actual science for this to get in a heliocentric orbit, but you know, you never know what might happen. Things could happen someday. So there you go. We have signal and we are back and we have transmitted the science from Mercury. So fantastic flyby and mission complete. So that instantly got us 5 more upgrade points, and we have a ton of science banked now waiting for us to be able to upgrade our research and development center. So let's go ahead and upgrade our brand new vehicle production line. 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. 0.425. So it's accelerating pretty rapidly as far as upgrades getting closer to rate 1, but we still have a very, very long way to go. Look at that, it's only going to take a year to build 42% of a Gemini 2. Fantastic. All right, another time warp, another orbital rocketry node completed. So in addition to the E-1 that we've unlocked and the MB3-3, we now have 1964 orbital rocketry, which gets us the AJ-10 Advanced, which is the trans stage for the Gemini plan. So that's something that I'm planning on building very, very soon. And then we have a massive vernier thruster and the H1 engine upgrade I am super stoked about. And then the Titan actually gets a couple upgrades too. So that's all fantastic, good stuff that we will be using a bunch. All right, so it's time to grab the last couple missions for our upcoming manned launch. So we have already first EVA, which is good, and we're going to be doing that here shortly, and hopefully not failing that contract. I would also like to take first docking. Yes, that's right, because I have an Agena target vehicle being constructed as we speak, and that I think is going to be part of our mission. And I'll talk more about what the mission profile is going to be once we are underway. But yeah, let's just grab that for another 900,000 funds on the advance. I'd also like to take this mission here. So this is the orbital flight with maneuvers and 2+ crew, which is kind of the generic repeatable orbital flight contract. And so this is just, get into orbit and do some science, and that is what we are going to do. Looks like this is actually going to be a pretty fantastic orbit. This is going to be very easy to accomplish the mission that I have planned, and we'll talk more about what that mission is, like I said, when we get to it. But I wanted to wait to pick up this contract until the time was a little bit closer, because it only has a 180-day duration, so I don't want to fail it just because I accepted it a little bit too early. That's why I've been kind of conservative about taking these contracts so far, is because I don't want to get them so early that and then I get distracted doing a bunch of different things and I end up failing contracts, and that's no fun for anybody. So anyways, we are going to grab that, and that is going to be part of that mission as well. So this is going to be a threefer kind of. And we are, like I said, we are in training for our first crewed lunar flyby. This is something that I'm planning on doing very, very soon. We have all of the technology components. It's just a matter of actually, testing the operational status of these bits. So I mentioned a little bit about the Tran stage, just kind of offhandedly. We'll talk about that once we are in orbit, but that is a big part of where we are going next. All right, so 2 million funds, you may remember, is the magic number. We are finally going to upgrade our research and development, and none too soon, because we are just stacking up science here. And we are also stacking up our ability to get more science, which is good. All these missions that we're sending out with all the new science parts is going to be a big way of us getting a lot more science a lot more rapidly. So I am super excited about that. So that's underway. There we go. I think that's actually most of our big upgrades lately. We are going to need 175,000 to upgrade our communication center, our deep space network nodes. But that's not going to be for a little while yet. That's not going to be until I get the next... where is it? Advanced communications is where that is. So I could move that up, but I would have to move up lunar exploration era electronics research. And what I think I might actually do is, as soon as I get this upgraded and done, I might just wipe out my entire research queue and restart the whole thing with all the science that I have, so that I could reprioritize, because I basically have just clicked every single node that I have available to me right now, just so that my science is never wasted, right? All of this is going to be useful, but I don't think I've ordered it in a way that is particularly useful, so I'll be playing around with that later on. So we have that upgrade coming. Tracking station, we need technology for. VAB is upgraded. It's going to be a little ways before we do that. Mission control might be a nice upgrade just to be able to take more contracts if needed, but I haven't really butted up against that too much, so I'm not too stressed about it. We will need this 3.5 million fund upgrade to be able to place flags, which sounds kind of like nonsense, but that's another one of those abstractions, because that doesn't just include, planting flags. That's actually the training for lunar surface operations. That's new spacesuits, that's better EVA equipment that is going to allow them to do the training, and all the facilities they need to do the training and the situation testing, material testing, and everything else that they would need to actually put boots on the ground of the lunar surface and plant a flag. So what we see out of that is you need that to be able to plant a flag, but what that actually is a whole lot of actual facilities upgrade. So that seems like it's completely ridiculous, but I promise it's worth it. So yeah, we're pretty well set up. The only thing that I'm thinking about is this 800,000 for the mission control upgrade, but that's not a super big priority. We are, of course, going to want to think about the 700-ton pad soonish, and that's going to cost me 500,000. So I could actually get that going right now, but once again, I don't feel a massive amount of pressure towards that, because we are just now using our 350-ton pad to its limit. So we'll wait a little bit on that. So yeah, we are actually good on that. So we could theoretically spend a bunch of money on our KCT upgrade points, and I don't mind doing a little bit of that, but we don't want to do too much because I'd like that to be mostly science in the future. All right, so just 7 more points just to get this up a little bit, because right now it's a little bit useless. Like, it's going to take 146 days to do this little Agena target vehicle. I need these to be built at roughly the same time, so I'll be doing some flipping back and forth, but that's it's fine, whatever. So let's see. We have our Venus transfer in 37 days, so that's how long we have to play with the 2 of these. But I'm going to need a second mission because we are always going to want 2 of these at a time, I think, roughly. So what I think I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to duplicate this Gemini 2. And that way, once these 2 vehicles finish, I'll have a Gemini running on our main production line, and then we will have a smaller sat on the smaller production line. And that way we can always like have things running. That's kind of how I envision using that big production line. All right, so now time for some flipping back and forth to get these done at the same time. All right, here on the pad, sitting in the darkness because it is very, very tall, is my Pioneer Venus 2 spacecraft, which is another attempt at getting a lander on Venus. And you'll notice that some things have changed. I have had to update my install again. Like, I think I did a bad job last time, and yeah, that meant that I was having all sorts of trouble, most of which appear to be fixed now that I have reinstalled everything. And I've also did a little bit more work configuring my my heads-up display so that it's hopefully a little bit better to provides a little bit better information and does some other cool stuff. So one of the things is I forgot about the existence of this, but I remembered now and I love it, is if you use Kerbal Engineer, you can actually have their rendezvous window has like a selector for targeting, which means you can target without jumping back and forth from the map and like actually scrolling out and like clicking on a thing in particular, which is super helpful. Unless you focus a target, look in the direction of the target, all sorts of stuff. So I remembered that existed, so we put that up there, and you know, everything else is we'll talk through as we get to. So yeah, this is a slight reconfiguration of a couple different parts of my Pioneer 2 Venus, but let's get it moving before I get too excited about that. Ignition. And we have liftoff of the Pioneer Venus 2, launching late at night into the plane of the moon. Yeah, so the first stage, there's been no real changes, so we can actually accelerate through this a bit. Let me get up, and I can feel a little bit more safe about that. Let me just make sure that my pitch rate is correct. Yep. Yeah, because we have now a pretty good thrust-to-weight ratio, and you'll see why here in just a moment. But I've been having trouble for some reason with thrust-to-weight ratio on my rockets. On rockets that I thought that I had built in a decent way that was, you know, dealt well with thrust-to-weight ratio and was able to get into orbit very nicely without having to be babysat or anything, I've been having trouble, and that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of am reinstalling everything and starting things from scratch a little bit on rebuilding all my boosters and all that sort of thing, because I feel like I must have done something wrong. Like in my willy-nilly updating, I must have messed something up. So we have 2 seconds until main stage cutoff and ignition of our upper stage. We have a good ignition, and you can see the first major change that we've made to the Pioneer Venus 2. We are using the LR87 LH2, which as the negative 37... I'm gonna omit the coast, maybe? Is that the guidance? There you go. I don't know what a negative 300-second coast was going to be, but I can't imagine it was good, so we're just going to go ahead and reset the guidance, and hopefully this will still get into a good orbit. Anyways, this was something that a lot of people mentioned to me that I should have used on this second stage from the start instead of the 4 RL10s like I did. And I was doing it for like weight reasons, like really weird weight reasons, in fact. Like 4 RL10s fully burned was like 15 tons lighter than the main than the stage than my 350 ton pad limit, and it gave me a little bit more delta V, but the thrust to weight ratio was a bit lower, and so I thought that that was probably going to be a better way to go, but my thrust to weight ratio was so low that it was having a really hard time getting into orbit. Like, it was having to loft way over the my apogee to burn into orbit, and that's not great. So I've already got a Centaur upper stage with 2 RL10s, and that works a lot better. So we've actually gotten away with using that, and notice that hot stages and then kicks off that stage there, so that all worked perfectly. And that LR87H2, even though it had a 10% ignition failure rate, we got away with it this time. I hadn't tested it before this, so we were super lucky, and that has worked out great. So now that we're way up out of the atmosphere and can now work on circularizing as we are falling back or rising up to our apogee, that is a much better time to circularize with a low thrust stage, not down in the atmosphere. So I was having trouble with that. And yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm not sure if something has actually changed, or if it was just my perception of it has changed, or the missions that I was trying to run have changed, where my what do you call it? My performance has been it's been required to have really precise amounts of performance. One way or the other, it's been kind of a problem with my rocket, so that's one of the reasons why I reinstalled. I just want to make sure that I haven't screwed anything up, and now I can build my rockets from scratch, just making sure that I know I have everything on correctly. And we are getting a whole bunch of new rocket configurations and so forth as well, so it's a great time to be doing this. We're kind of in between a big batch of missions, so if I was going to do this reinstall and make sure that everything was working correctly, now is the time. So there we go. We have made our orbit in the plane of the moon around Earth at about 150 kilometers. So now it's time for us to plan our transit to Venus. And here's the reason why I love the heck out of this engineer window with the buttons, is you can go back to the selection, and then I can just say I'm targeting Venus now. And now I have target equals Venus, and all of the data around Venus is right here. It's so handy. Yeah, and I have a whole bunch of other information stuff that I've got on here that we will talk about later. All right, so we have made orbit with 5,300 meters per second of delta V remaining. This is an unlayered, un-MLI'd upper stage with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, so we do need to make that burn pretty darn quickly. So let's see what that is going to look like. We can just pop open our maneuver planner. Advanced transfer, pork chop, there we go. So we don't have a lot of great options here, but I'm kind of looking in this area and trying to include the capture burn. It wants me to go within 3 days, and that's not quite what I'm looking for. So I want to just see, let's just take a look at. It's hard to get like the right now. Maybe there's... Wait, didn't someone say that I can... Yeah, look at that. You can actually... You can move your window around by pressing the WASD keys. Neat. That helps. That helps a lot, actually. So I can now plan this this maneuver, which is going to take 8,776 meters per second of delta V. Okay, you see I've added the total delta V vacuum number down here onto our stage stat so that we can see exactly how much delta V that we have to work with. So anyways, I have created this maneuver, and we have I've lost the plot. I'll select target Venus. There we go. Great node. So this is actually going to be a little bit more than our Centaur upper stage is going to be able to handle. So 5,403 meters per second, which means we are going to have to give it a little bit of assistance. So what I can, but what that also means is this is the including capture burn version of the transfer, so that actually tries to minimize how much delta V that you're going to need all told for both burns, which is actually going to be really helpful when we get there. So this should, in theory, only cost me about 8,800 meters per second of delta V out of the 9,100 that I have total, which, if I'm doing my math right, means I should have about 300 meters per second of delta V at the end of all of both burns, with minus any corrections that I need to make on the way for inaccurate burns, because this is a very long couple of burns that we'll be doing. So that should be perfect. So let's go take a look at what this will look like. Oh my god, I love this tool. Yep, so that's going to put us into actually, is that like totally equatorial? That's exactly perfect. That is exactly what I wanted, actually. Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping for, is a nice low circular, just about equatorial orbit around Venus, which I think will be very helpful in trying to make sure that we can get both sunlight and communications back to Earth. So yeah, this is perfect. Very nice. So our second burn is going to cost us about 3,500 meters per second of delta V. You can see the total here in precise node, which I'm using. And 3,500 minus the extra that I use here should be just fine, in theory. It's all going to be a little bit different than what I planned for, but hopefully that should be enough to get all that there. And yeah, if we can get an actually circular orbit around Venus, that would be so freaking helpful, and it would eliminate a lot of the issues that I had with my previous mission. So let's go ahead and execute this node. All right, so now we have ignited our RL-10 upper stage and are pushing on towards Venus. Fantastic. So yeah, while we're doing that, we can talk a little bit about this probe that I have adjusted slightly. So I have not thrown out any designs. I have just made some adjustments to it. So let's go ahead, and while we're doing that, that was an aim camera button. So one of the things that I've changed is that I actually uninstalled the expansions because I don't think RP-1 uses them at all. I don't think there's any parts or anything that you get out of it. So anything to reduce my loading times and the amount of RAM that I'm using is probably a good thing. But I'm finding that I don't have an aim camera button, and I'm wondering if that is where that is from. So I may have to put them back in just for that purpose, if nothing else. But anyways, so I have added, you'll notice, all kinds of fun stuff like this helium magnetometer boom. I've got a whole bunch of the new science I've kitted this thing out with. I've tuned up the antenna up to tech level 4 and pumped up the power to 38 dBm so that we should be able to transmit back all this new good science no matter where we are in the orbit of Venus. I'd really rather not have that problem again. But yeah, we're decked out with new experiments, and to power everything, I have put on my shiny new XT1 solar panel array, which is still tech level 1, so it's not like super duper exciting, but it is a much bigger, it has a lot more surface area than some of the hinged ones, and because it folds, that means it tucks up real nicely. I didn't actually check and see if it's actually lower mass than other panels of the same power level, but I imagine that it can't be because it's all the same material, right? So I can't imagine there's a huge mass savings, but there's a lot of space savings, which I like. And these are, as you can see, these are not rotating towards the sun. That is a technology that you unlock a little bit later on, which I'm very excited for, but that's something that we already orient ourselves toward the sun, so we don't need to stress too much about it. So yeah, we are almost halfway through this burn, and things are going pretty darn well so far. Still collecting a lot of good data on our RL-10s, even though it's like the RL-10 space program at this point. We have used it on just about everything, so hopefully, fingers crossed, there's no major issues that I need to start flailing around to deal with. you know, let's just open up this node here and just set that right there, just in case I need to abort node execution for any reason, now that I think about it. So yeah, we are on our way. This is going to be another another take on the Venus multi-probe mission, basically, but with all the new science and so forth that we have, and is kind of the last of it's kind of a bridge to my new interplanetary program, where I'm going to be doing a whole lot of new science with new technologies and better solar panels and better communications and everything else, as I've been promising for so very long. And this is kind of the ambassador into that program, using a lot of my new technology, but without using too much that has been changed as far as boosters, upper stages, and so forth. The LR87 LH2 notwithstanding. Oh, one thing I think I didn't mention was I needed to make sure that this thing could launch on the 350-ton pad, and a fully burned LR-87 LH2 was going to be like 364 tons with this payload on this mission. However, you don't need to fully burn every rocket. Like, I have it in my head that like you like have to do that. Like, it's a kind of a compulsion almost. I make sure every single rocket burns 5 seconds longer than the 5 seconds longer than the rated burn time. Like, it's like it needs to be that way, but you don't have to. Like, and so for the example, this one, I just reduced the tank size, the tank length on the second stage that had the LR-87 LH2 until it was 349.5 tons, and I got about the same performance as my RL-10 second stage with much better thrust to weight ratio, and there you go. Now we are doing just fine and able to get up there. So, all right, we are just about burned out of our liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. We didn't lose too much to boil off. You can tell by the delta between the two, but we do need to now kick off this stage, activate these avionics, and fire up the probe's thrusters, and then that will hopefully finish off this burn quite nicely. Yeah, so on our way with that. Like I said, not too much has changed here. I haven't changed the fuel or the mix or any of that. I did put a lunar rated heat shield up on top here in case I wanted to test out how a spicier entry. I still don't think that coming in and dropping this probe into the atmosphere from an interplanetary trajectory is a good idea. That will probably just destroy the thing, because Venus is just very, very warm. Like, it's very warm, and the atmosphere is very thick, and yeah, if I get it just slightly wrong, then the whole mission fails and I feel like a doofus. I would much rather just do it as safely as I can, shed those 3,000 meters per second using these thrusters, and then we'll stress about dropping this into the atmosphere. Maybe then I can drop it in a little bit lower than 110 kilometers, so that I can get so that I can get down a little bit faster, but I really don't anticipate that being that much of an issue. All right, so we are finally just about finished with this burn. No stress, no drama, and beautiful views of Earth receding with all of the latest updates to RSS textures and RSS VE and all of that. So there we go. That has finished. Let's abort this node execution and actually just point straight. Sun is down. So just do that, and we can remove all these nodes, because we're going to have to do some correction regardless. That is not going to be something that we can just assume is going to be fine. So there we go. Let's go ahead and, yeah, now that we're doing that, let's go focus target. God, I love this thing so much. Okay, so we have lost our encounter, but not by a bunch. So instead of fussing around with that, what I'm going to do is, I think we're just going to leave Earth. So go back to target selection. Oh yeah, so I was focusing Venus, and then you can just click focus vessel, and it just pops you right back. God, it's so cool. I know this is like really old news for a lot of people, but like, I'd forgotten that this existed and how much I lived using it. And now that I have it back, it's like finding an old friend. It's wonderful. Yeah, so we are about, let's see, a day, almost 2 days from our escape from Earth. So let's just go ahead and get that moving. All right, so we have exited the sphere of influence of Earth, and we are ready to begin our journey on our way towards Venus. So I'm discovering that I just don't have quite enough real estate here. Darn it. I'm gonna have to move this. Oh, the first world problems of having a of reinstalling and having to move things around a bunch. I don't know, maybe that'll be fine, whatever. Things will move around. I'd like to have just a static place where I just have everything on my dashboard, but you know, the problem of limited real estate here. Anyways, taking a look at our Pioneer Venus probe, we have all sorts of fun things built in. We have new experiments that I would very much like to get going. Turn off Maneuver Planner. So we have a couple duplicates here, but we should turn on... We have Cosmic Ray Science 1.5, which I think is our old one, probably. Retrieve, never... All seems fine. Imaging spectrometry is not something that we're going to be able to do because you have to be very low, and thankfully I'm not low over the sun. If we were 4 million meters above the sun, we would be dead. That is just the case as far as that goes. Infrared radiometry, there we go. We got that going. That's an old one as well. We have a shiny new magnetometer boom that we can go ahead and extend. Boom. Boop. There we go. Got good experiments. Good experiment running on that over the sun, and that will get down in orbit of Venus as well. Orbital perturbation, as always, but we can't quite do that one because we are not inclined enough over the sun. So yeah, we're too close to the ecliptic, which, whatever. Not that stressed about that. Yep, and we also have a camera, which is very cool, the Visible Imaging 2, which I just found out, like, after I launched this mission, has, like, a ScanSat experiment built into it. So if you open this... Yeah, so we have altimetry low and multispectral and anomaly done of Earth. So that multispectral is biome, anomaly is the little points of interest that are all over the place. I'm not 100% sure if those are actually things in RP-1 or if those are like Kerbin's ones, but you know, I shouldn't assume. There's probably cool things if I go to each of these spots. In any case, those are the experiments that I have so far as ScanSat science. The camera has VisLow, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is compared to altimetry. I wonder if that's just like a color map. Like, yeah, I really have no idea because I don't think I've ever done that before. So yeah, it'll be a better visual representation of Earth, and that actually represents some of the early mapping experiments that were done in orbit of Earth to give us all of those, like, you know how Google Earth has all those pictures, like that's kind of what that is. Like that would be the Viz High, but you know, this would be some of the early precursors of that. So that is something that is built into the camera if and only if you actually use the camera part and you don't tuck it inside your science core, which is what I have done, and now I regret doing, but that's fine. So that's something that we'll deal with more in the future, and now that I know that that's there, I can plan for it every time. So yeah, that is pretty much that. I would like to set up the power stuff. All right, so we do the power off, power on in case we run out of power, but these solar panels are very, very good, so we shouldn't have too much trouble. So as you can see in our science experiments here, our solar panels are giving us 0.170 per second, and that is the current draw at this altitude is like 1.6 or 0.16 or so. Just doing quick napkin math, that might be wrong, but that's not super important because we are now descending very rapidly to get closer to the sun and get more power. So this should, in theory, once again, have plenty of power to run everything. And I have beefed up the size of these panels to actually make sure of that this time. Well, maybe. So now it's time to get a little bit closer. So what I'm going to do is, what I found is useful is just to do the bi-impulsive home and transfer to target. Create that node, and that tells me it's going to take 171 meters per second to get to improve our flyby of Venus. Let's see if there's any 102 if I intercept only, no capture burn. Wonder what the difference is on that. Okay, oddly enough, the intercept only, no capture burn maneuver is actually better in pretty much every way. So we're going to do that. We go, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of prograde to get us into a nice low orbit instead of a high one. We're going to have to fix that again, I'm sure, but this is only going to take about 3,300 meters per second after all is said and done to get down, and then that should leave us with plenty of fuel left to actually drop our probe into that orbit. So let's go ahead and well, we can just plan this. Okay, so if we drop into a low orbit, it's a little bit wiggly because we're still, I think we're probably moving a little bit. So if I just go into a little bit of a time warp, just to lock things up. Hopefully that will stay very steady now. And this, at our parasite, just about there, that's good. Bringing down our orbit pretty darn low. Yeah, 3,400 meters per second. So if we look at our trip info, we're looking at spending a total of 3,502, which is a little too much. Okay, so that is a little too much. We are not going to be able to get into a nice circular orbit after all, which is pretty unfortunate. I thought we were going to be doing better than we actually are. So that's unfortunate, but is what it is. This is what we've got to do to get into this orbit, and so there we go. So what I'm thinking, dropping it down would take 3,675 meters per second. So we may end up having to do a bit of a nighttime landing. So what I'm thinking is that when we get close, we should be able to determine exactly where our parasite is going to be, so that we can have signal back to Earth. So we can anticipate pretty much that when we get to Venus, Earth is going to be behind us. Like, it's going to be in this direction again, just like it was the last time that we had this arrangement of planets. That's a nice thing about this, is that it kind of works the same way every time. So I can assume that we want to be on this side. And so right now, our parasite is actually in a good position. It's just going to be a little bit dark. And I'm just going to have to deal with that this time, I think. I just don't know that there's anything I can do to make that not be an issue without waiting way too long. And that pretty much failed my mission last time. So this time, we may have just a dark landing, and I'll crank up the ambient brightness. It'll be fine. So that is what I think the plan's going to have to be. So we will just insert into an elliptical orbit and deal with the amount of delta V that we will have left over, because we don't have enough to get into a nice, perfectly tight circular orbit. But we are going to be right along the equator, which is going to be very helpful as far as making sure we have sunlight when we want to do things, and can pass over the site of the landing. And or that's not necessarily equatorial. I'm sorry. This is the orbit of Venus around the sun. That has nothing to do necessarily with the orbit of Venus itself. Yeah, because I'm not 100% sure what Venus's equatorial tilt is without time warping a whole bunch, and I don't want to do that too much because we do have another rocket building over the next couple of days. Okay, so if we time warp to 1000x, my my Venus lander is like jumps up off of the planet. I'm not sure what that's about, but yeah, it looks like it's rotating roughly similar to the ecliptic plane. Okay, so Venus has a very small axial tilt, only about 3 degrees. So yeah, it should be actually roughly similar to the ecliptic plane. So I can assume that will be correct. And if I'm wrong, then please let me know. But yeah, anyways, this is what the plan is so far. We will have this burn in about 100 days to do a little bit of a mid-course correction to make sure that we can hit Venus exactly where we would like to, and then we will be landing in about 200 or so, 220 days or so. Fantastic. So successful mission so far. All right, but that is going to do it for us today. Ran a little bit long because I just wanted to get that Pioneer Venus 2 mission on its way, and I just wouldn't shut up about it. So anyways, that is it. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.